so I didn't have any difficulty with that. Although his directions need a little tweaking, just a little.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so I think I remember the presentation you gave a couple years ago about that forum-based the web services project.
Yeah. I guess we also kind of basically we're kind of using Cascade a bit as a back-end database server, if you will. So we do have a fair amount of interaction. So we have a form that generates an asset inside of Cascade and then triggers a publish. So a user can go into Cascade, look at the assets like records, or they can go to a website where it presents them the information as a CSV file or whatever the case might be. We also have a system where we use it as a scheduling tool. So from the talk that I gave, basically one of our departments, our career services department, has a program where essentially alumni mentors sign up to talk to students. So we have a frontline form where alumnus can go in, register a profile, if you will, and that registers in Cascade. Then that produces a list of the different mentors that students can meet with. Then the students get a form which reads out of Cascade to show what available mentors are there and what time slots they are available for different meetings. So essentially, a student can then sign up in 15-minute slots, and that then also registers inside of Cascade so that the administrators in the career services department can look up and see what mentors are signed up for what students are signed up for what. So essentially, students can then sign up in 15-minute slots.
Hearing an echo.
Feedback, yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'm getting that too.
That might be me, or it might be if you have your the Google Plus page. Okay, there it goes. I guess it was me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be me because I'm not using headphones. So.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, that's Eric. That's a pretty sophisticated use of web services because you're like changing assets inside of Cascade and stuff, right?
That is correct. Yes.
That's cool too. Like one of the reasons I want to learn more about his library is to create reports and stuff. Like there's one that's really cool. I think that lets you manage to look up assets that are sort of don't have any relationships, that don't have that are sort of old and can be deleted. Because we've been using Cascade for a long time, and we certainly have a lot of dead assets, if you will. So.
Yeah, certainly. Should be quite good for that. I'm interested in Wing's library in part because while we've done a fair number of sophisticated things, it's I feel like I'm making lots of off programs. I really don't have a library that I'm working with, if you will. And so in a way, it becomes kind of cookie cutter after a way. I copy a program, I tweak it for my use, and then and it's over and over and over. It becomes kind of difficult to manage over time. So anything that would make that process easier would be wonderful.
Did you, and we lost Chris, but you're back, so that's good.
Yes, having some, still getting the double audio.
Okay. It could be because if you got to this from the Google event, it's broadcasting live, so that could, you might have two instances of this with a slight delay on the other one. I was curious for anyone who's installed or started the basic setup process. If anyone deviated from the process, somebody mentioned that it could use some tweaking. I kind of, there's some things I would tweak, but I know everyone's different. So So I'm curious to hear what tweaks or how people may have deviated from the setup.
Oh, well, I noticed, for instance, that the sample code that Wing provided for the test page didn't actually, in the require once function, the path and the name of the file that contains the authorizing user information did not match the same file name as what was in his library. So I remember going, oh, why isn't this working? Because I figured it would be pretty easy to kind of copy and paste and such. So, you know, by tweaking, I guess I mean that making sure that the sample stuff that he gives matches very much the library setup that he has. Looks like he had changed file names basically at some point, and so he didn't update one versus the other. But for the most part, I was able to get it up and running pretty much as is. I did realize, though, that I am running on a local version, a local web server to my desktop, my laptop computer that I use. But I did realize that that probably wasn't necessary. There are some FTP programs, for instance, that will do live updates on your web server. So I didn't have to be running my web server locally. I could have been essentially editing locally, and then every time I saved, copied down to my remote web server in order to see the results. But it didn't make sense to make it local, just because since I'm here at home, I realized these sessions I work at home on Mondays, so I can oversee my son a bit. It would make things easier to see it all local and live rather than worrying about the remote access. Although my Cascade instance is remote as well, so but it does seem to function pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Eric.
I had just set the script up on our server. We have a dev server and a live server, actually several of them, several paired up. So I found one that doesn't get a lot of traffic and just set everything up on that. And the only difference is that I did have the same problem with the file naming confusion, which it's like one of those things when you're coding and it's an oversight. You don't pick up at first. It's always the last place you look. Yeah, and the only difference that I had done was I put everything into an object wrapper. I like to deal in classes rather than have a configuration file wide open like this. So this way I can just run 2 or 3 lines of code with all my parameters, like username, password, location, stuff like that. So it's kind of like what you would do setting up a database configuration in PDO. You supply the DSN and then the username and password, and that's it. One line does it all for configuration. So I think that's the only difference. Just to, my office, we tend to have to hand things off to other departments on campus. So if I can just say, take this group of files and then just configure this this method call for this class, and that will set everything up for you. It just makes it a little bit easier looking further down the road for other people being able to implement it without having to walk them through it so much.
Now that's a really interesting approach. So you created an object.
Yeah, just a wrapper. I mean, it takes all the parameters. Like the path, the site name, usernames and passwords, anything that is pretty much in the standard class below the config file there on the basic setup page. Anything that the user has to supply, just build it into a constructor or have a set of an array parameter passed in there, and then they can go with it. I think in when I program, I think in terms of classes. So even from the get-go, kind of like Java's model, where you're forced to start with a opening class, a main class, and that pretty much will get you going. So that's just my workflow. I mean, other people might have other ways of doing it, but it kind of encapsulates everything and keeps everything simple in case there's a programmer who doesn't know how to get through a setup. Just putting that stuff they're still going to have to put that stuff on the server, and I did, and like Eric, I had I'm sorry, the other Eric, I did have it set up locally as well.
Great.
Yeah, that might be a little, yeah, that's a little confusing. We're both Eriks, and we're both Eriks with
I know. I was looking at that. I'm like, there's something wrong with my Google chat here. But yeah, it's I use a IDE called PHP Storm. You guys are probably familiar with it, and that allows me to actually like right-click on the file and do an upload. I just map everything to my FTP server and then throw it up there that way. So that it is a little bit easier, but still having to constantly, upload a file to a server is kind of a pain in the neck. I wish there was something that would do all of that as I'm writing. streamed uploads, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of PHP Storm. I'm using Sublime Text.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one too.
The one thing I did differently is I have two computers for work. I have a PC and a Mac now, and so I used I used MAMP instead of XAMPP. But there's I'm sure a ton of different AMP stacks you can use to get PHP locally.
Sure.
And then the other thing I did was I moved the htdocs folder where you're supposed to put all your files locally. I moved that into my Dropbox account so that I could download, so I can sync just, I can have one repository of code and just sync it between both computers.
That's interesting. Dropbox has a repo. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then you can also, so will you put the root folder on the server and that syncs with Google or Dropbox rather?
So I put the root folder htdocs in Dropbox, and then on each machine I point the PHP the AMP stack to that folder instead of the default on your C drive.
Oh, that's interesting. I learned something new today.
I just knew that sometimes I'd be working on one computer and sometimes on the other, and
things get out of sync real easily. Really
quickly, yeah.
Yeah. Just like documentation does when you change things around. So, we use Git here a lot, but you still have to. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the neck to have to keep deploying. I do have a deployment set up for all the code that we have on Cascade, but the problem is you still have to get to a point where it's workable. You don't want to be like working on a feature and then committing and pushing the changes up, and the push actually triggers the sync, basically. But the problem with that is that you'd be doing that a lot. There's a lot of steps. It's funny enough, it's actually easier to just FTP something because it's one click and it goes, whereas with Git, you kind of want to reach a point where the feature is complete and then you do a deployment of it on the test server. But that's another way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. I think the advantage too of using FTP is then you don't have to worry about the firewall between your script and Cascade as much.
Yeah.
We've actually been using Cascade as a repository. So, I mean, I'm not going to do that for this, but we actually upload our PHP into Cascade using the template. So essentially, it's outputting a PHP page. So once we're done with some code, we'll literally copy and paste it into a block, text area that's part of a data definition that outputs a PHP app. So that way it borrows the look and feel. It's like with I mentioned all our forms that we use. So basically it fits in with Reed's general look and feel on the pages, and if any other users need access to it, it's in the same location as any other pages that are related to those apps. Plus you get version control with Cascade, which is not as fancy as Git. We use Git at Reed for everything else, just not this.
Yeah. But we have a team here, so I always kind of have to keep in sync not with just the files that are on the server, but with what they're doing. And if we do have a PHP kind of applet going on in the, he's having fun back there, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's jumping around. I may need to bounce him on my knee for a moment. So keep on talking.
All right.
Go right ahead.
The PHP code kind of serves up an applet for ordering campus publications from our office, print media, and basically we're constantly updating it and trying to take the rapid deployment approach or extreme whatever they call it. And so if we have 3 or 4 developers working on it, we want to get that code onto Cascade to a central point and then deploy to the Cascade server for publishing. And just having all 3 of us work separately and then come together, do all the commits and merging and stuff like that, and then put it on the development server directly rather than doing a publish. And then once that's ready to go, do the deployment from there. So the master repo comes from the dev server, and then we push out to the live server during a publish. So I think I have that right. Yeah, deployment to the dev publishes out to the live. That's the kind of workaround we have going.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that's I would love to do more with GitHub.
Yeah. Once you master it, it becomes a tool you'll never leave behind.
Yeah.
I love using it, especially if you're working. If you're working by yourself, FTP is fine. But if you're working with other developers or you're collaborating on a project, and you have many people contributing different pieces of code, it just makes life so much easier. And it's not like anything else I've ever used. And I'm still just scratching the surface with it. So. It's
nice.
A fun little tool. Yeah.
Wow. Hey Eric, before I forget, I just tried to mute you and I was successful.
Yeah, it worked.
But I wasn't able to unmute you.
Oh no.
See if you can.
How's that?
Yeah.
Better. Yeah. All right. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. But he's been pretty good.
Hey.
He's gotten pretty big. How old is he now?
He's getting close to 7 months now.
Wow.
That's a big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's curious what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's welcome to join the tutorial too if he wants to learn.
Well, I made arrangements for somebody else to be here take care of him for next week. So,
you mean he's not doing your database administration?
He hasn't quite graduated to that yet.
Okay.
But he can visit.
All right.
I'll make sure he says hi.
Okay. I don't know if you guys have the Q&A app active or enabled on your instance. It's one of the apps on the left. But I just got we got a question from Wing. He says he can view the Hangout, but he can't join.
You know, I had a lot of trouble joining in, actually. Took me some... and I have no idea what I did to actually get in, finally. Click enough, and it worked.
I had the opposite. I got in, but then I had two ins instead of... I was hearing you guys double. That was quite a trip to listen to. But, yeah, it wasn't that hard.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, I get this. We get this problem a lot when we have the regional Hangout. And since I'm the host, I never have to. I'm always the one doing the inviting, never being invited. So I'm not sure what you guys are seeing. But Wing, if you can see this, I just sent you another invitation. And so I think that will both appear in the notification icon in the top right, and also maybe in your inbox.
Yeah, I think I went through like 3 steps. I clicked the the video in my message dropdown, went to the your page, Erik, and then it opened up another tab as well as the other window, and I think that's why I got double. So it's a few steps. It's not direct.
Well, one thing I noticed, the invitation sent me was in Google Plus originally, and it looks like you can kind of join, but it kept forcing me to start an individual Hangout.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to go to hangouts.google.com rather than Google Plus, which then gave me the option to find your conversation and then join from there. That was a big part of it. So I don't know if that makes any difference, but it was kind of a really roundabout way.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, well, that's actually really good to know for the next Hangout. Maybe I'll put some instructions to that effect to help people out. It's good feedback.
Yeah, I think that's on Google probably. Get them that click flow going.
I don't know. Like clicking from service to service to eventually figure out where it is that get you where you're going.
It's so simple but so complex.
Agreed.
Yeah. And when you work for Google, you can fix that, right? You have another 3 months.
So I'm assuming you guys got further along. Sounds like you guys didn't really have any problems with the setup.
No, I mean the permissions part was a little rough. I'm not a server admin by any measure, but I can do a little bit. So I think that might be. I know that Wing does mention that in the what can go wrong section, but hopefully there's savvy enough users out there that they can get around that. There's not a lot of. I mean, when I got into development, I was like, I want to do it all. I want to do the server admin, the database, the development, the design. But after a while, I got scared away from permission management and accidentally deleting things from the server, and those kind of nightmares.
Right. Yeah, and that's another argument for just using your remote server.
Yeah, I got to get used to that. It's something it's a bad habit.
Yeah, I'm listening to you guys, and I'm also emailing Wing directly to see if this helps.
It occurred to me that one issue that some folks may encounter is the setting up of the PHP and whatever on the local end. I can't speak for Windows folks, but for the Mac end, the last several versions of Mac OS include a web server with it. That includes PHP, but turned off. So that's in fact what I ended up doing is I went directly to the local install, turned on PHP, and then started it up. And so I didn't need to do much more than that. So I didn't need to install PHP and any server parts separately. And I don't know if that's helpful for folks. I know that alone could be a big hurdle for some folks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I had to do something weird on my Mac. Like I had to change ports so that it didn't interfere with the pre-installed PHP port, and as a precaution, and I don't. Maybe it was off, so that's why there was no real conflict, as it turned out. But that was a step on my Mac that I didn't have on my Windows.
Yeah, I've run into that a few times. I've taken to using MAMP a lot. When I get my new Mac, MAMP goes on it first thing, and that's usually pretty helpful. But yeah, if you run MAMP or any other one of those stacks, you run into conflicts if the web server is running. Somewhere in the preferences, you can turn that off. Hello, Wing.
Hey. I've been watching for a while now.
Glad you could join us.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. We were just discussing the basic setup, and
yeah, I heard everything.
I'm assuming you've gotten through the process, okay?
Well, I just need a link.
Oh, I would chew on that.
one thing I was going to add to the points about where people might get tripped up. Where I got tripped up was right after your instructions on adding or installing PHP. There's a part about it's kind of an optional suggestion, I think, to add the link to the folder, so that when you include the library on all your files, you don't have to include the absolute path.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I couldn't get that to work, so I mean, it's not a big deal. I just include the whole path to the library, to the authentication file, and then to the library. But he agrees with me. That's just something I would put out there.
Hey, Erik, Erik Espana, have you have you done something to the php.ini file to point to the folder?
Right.
Yeah, I put it in the, I forget which directive it was, but I put the path in that directive.
If you're running multiple versions of PHP or Apache or whatever, they may be pointing at different locations for the php.ini file, so you might have put it in the wrong one.
Yeah,
I had to figure that out. In fact, the default install for Mac OS doesn't even have a php.ini file, so I had to create my own.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Expect it to work, but I got it to work just fine.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow, I haven't created a PHP.ini file from scratch in a long time.
It's really bare.
Is it true it doesn't come with an ini file?
It did not. It did not.
Buried somewhere.
So once I created and restarted it, it found it just fine. So.
Huh. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Speaking of INI, the INI file, does this is a really, this is really getting into the weeds, but is anyone using like errors turned completely, like showing all errors, or what level of error display are people using for this?
Like error, reporting the errors, like error logging and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you can set whether or not to log certain errors.
There's a directive you can put in the PHP, your actual app, your program, to log errors. And I tend to turn everything on. Give me warnings, give me errors, give me the whole bit. Unless it's disturbing performance. Oh, he's trying to turn my headset off. Unless it's disturbing performance, I find it's better to figure out what's going on. But you can always turn it off once you deploy it by removing the line.
Yeah, I prefer the. I'll do it in my code at like a configuration file, a global one, and then I won't do display errors. I'll do error reporting to the log file, and then have a custom log file somewhere that I can always access. Oh, that looks like a lot of fun.
Oh, that's interesting, though. Okay.
Yeah. So what I do is then I'll keep a terminal window open on the server, and then tail F the error log, so I'm getting live feeds of all the errors without disrupting the way that it looks on the web page. And I've used that for many years. It's really handy and non-disruptive to like designers when you forget to go to turn that display errors off. And they're like, all this weird error code started showing up in my design. I'm like, oh, sorry, I'll fix that. So
that I didn't know you could do that. That's good to know.
Yeah, you can. It's a 3-step thing. I have it it's about 3 lines of code. You turn display errors off, turn error logging on, and then do your error reporting directive, which is all and not notice warnings, and the other insignificant one. There's a third one that I use too.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I could definitely walk you through it. Point point out. I'll just send you my config file without all the credentials in it, and it's pretty easy. And it's nice because it's in real time. So, and you're not going to get any surprises. You get all of your your SQL report errors. So it's not just the code that's being put out. If there's a wonky query to the database, then it'll tell you that, just like a MySQL gives you the error itself. It's neat, and Apache errors as well. Okay.
Oh yeah, I would love to see how you set that up.
Okay. I wonder if I'll try to dig it up right now. I'll let you guys.
Erik, were you going to make another point?
Oh, I was just going to say that in the apps that I write, I use a lot of try-catch. Error handling, and that way the end user can control what the end user sees on their end, but making sure that all the errors are still logged to the server.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, yeah, you can take a look at the server, find it out, but you don't have to worry about those errors coming up for the end user.
That's good to know. I mean, because part of the reason I think it's good for people that choose to do this locally is you can really, when you're on your remote server, it might be hard to have display errors turned on for obvious reasons. So this is really good stuff.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things that you don't have to go back and reconfigure. I mean, usually the server admins complain to me because there's this huge error log file being generated every time somebody accesses a page that has problems. But the nice thing is that you don't have to worry about deploying that code to a live server and having your error reporting report to the HTML. And that's always like one of those heart in your throat type of moments when the site goes live and you're like, no, I didn't mean to do that.
Right. Yeah. All right. Wing, since you weren't like in the hangout and just watching, are there any things you wanted to go back to or
well, there's one thing I want to make sure that will work next week. I want to test the screen share. For example, if I want to talk about some code, I want to have feedback from you guys. I mean, whether you can see the code I'm looking at or the browser, something like that, before we do the real thing next week.
Yeah. Do you want to test it out?
For example, if I pull up some code, I want to make sure everybody can see the code and let me try.
Yeah, why don't you go for it?
Everybody can follow me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's see.
You're all over the place.
I'm trying to pull up some code, and I want to share it so that I want to see if you can see the code. Let me first pump up the font size to make it large enough.
Is there another window for the screen sharing?
No, when
I don't think so.
Oh, looks like I got it to work.
Nice.
Yeah, when you share your screen, it just replaces your camera feed.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
This Google Chat really makes my computer run hot.
Yeah.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
How do I turn it off? There we go.
What did you do to get that?
Now, can you see my screen, like the code?
No, I see a black spot with your name on it.
Oh, okay.
Wing, I think you were sharing the hangout.
Sharing the chat, yeah.
So.
Hey, kiddo. Can I have my headphones back? Pretty please.
So Chris, if you just so you know, the screen share feature is one of the second app on the left.
Like the green one?
The green one, yeah.
Oh, I see it. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I think Wing, you selected the chat window. So oh, there we go.
Yeah, there we are.
So can you see the code? For example, if I talk about like the line 9, can you see the line of code?
Yeah. I can see
Okay,
it.
okay. Is the
Oh,
font okay?
Fonts, yeah, great. It's a little blurry at times, but I guess that's the rendering.
Okay. Well, you have the code. I just need like to tell people, okay, I'm looking at this file, at this line, something like that, so that everybody can follow.
Wait, just go test 1 2 3.
That's one. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
the most
looks.
important thing for me, like to make sure.
I'm noticing you're sharing the entire screen. Is it possible to share just the window? That might make it clear.
Oh, sure. Let's see. Instead of this entire screen.
Because yeah, mine gave me an option to pick specific windows, like in a browser or whatever, not just the whole screen.
Yeah, mine too.
Maybe I have already passed that point. Because right at the beginning, I shared the entire screen. I don't know how to go back.
So
Next time I'll do just the whatever window. Yeah.
so one of the options, Wing, is the entire screen. So that is the entire screen, and then it lists all your other windows.
Right.
Oh, Chris, what'd you do there?
That's the code for setting your display errors off, logging errors on, and then there's another any set error log, which will actually it's. I was going to, since Wing brought up the screen sharing, I was going to share my code, but we have usernames and passwords in that file, so you're not going to get that, guys. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chris. I'll copy that.
And then that's just the error log, path to log file. And then in the terminal, you use Mac, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay, so in the terminal, just go onto your server, wherever the path is to that log file, and do path to log file, like that, tail-f, and that will give you a real-time bottom. It'll bottom concatenate down to the bottom of the file, and as you're refreshing the page or whatever, when you visit it, it will spit out your errors in order. So and especially if you use like the other Erik mentioned, using exception handling.
Yep.
That's really neat because then it does the stack traces, and those are really helpful because they'll do them in order of when the error happened, and then reference the other methods or what have you that those errors were inherited from. So
cool. I'll give that a try.
yeah, it's like 4 lines of code, well, 3 lines of code and one little console command.
And where did you say you're supposed to put the first few lines of code?
All the settings, I'll put them in the config file. Like on our new site for WordPress, I have a config file for. I don't use the WordPress ones. I put them into a separate file and then just include that in the functions.php, which is that runs first before everything in WordPress. And this way I can troubleshoot that stuff. And the same goes for my Cascade stuff. Long before Wing came along and gave us this beautiful library to work with for Cascade, I had developed my own framework, so to speak. It was kind of loose. When I say framework, I mean it loosely. It wasn't really big, but I had a config file on that the init.php would include, and it would run through all that. That's where this would be included. So,
gotcha. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I showed it to a student of ours, or one of our interns, on how to do this, because she wasn't troubleshooting. She wasn't following the debug rule, and when I showed it to her, wow, she was like, it's just a speed enhancement because you don't have to wait for the page to load for all this to happen and all the errors to be reported.
Gotcha. Yeah, all right. Well, I'll give this a shot. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
So Wing, do you want to talk a little bit about what we should expect next week?
Well, next week I haven't asked this question before, but I know Erik Gorka knows a lot about web services. So you have been doing things too. But Chris, how much experience do we have with respect to web service development? I will ask this question around. I need to know where everybody is so that I know where to start.
Well, I've worked with the Cascade SOAP service once before, and I was explaining to Erik earlier that we did an implementation where we had to export all of our news content from our main web page to a WordPress instance. So instead of using the default WordPress exporter, because it didn't meet all the requirements that we had, I had built a bunch of PHP code to kind of suck everything off of Cascade using the WSDL. So there's that. In previous employee, I had worked with SOAP services to do business-to-business, point-to-point data sharing and stuff like that. So it's good. I'd say about medium experience.
Pretty savvy, I would say.
Yeah.
I need to know whether there are real beginners, so that I need to measure my pace and how fast I should move and things like that. I need to find out right at the beginning, and I also need to keep everybody engaged so that you won't be bored to death. Okay, when I keep talking about the WSDL and the basic operations.
Yeah, WSDL can be, for people who haven't used it, I would suggest maybe spending a little time, feeling it out, see what people know and don't know, and then if they have a low understanding of it, because I think the method calls were a real learning curve for me when I first learned how to do SOAP requests and responses. Understanding that structure is
right.
But once you do, you're good to go.
Yeah, but the point of using my library is, everything is hidden behind the scenes, so you don't see any SOAP call, anything like that.
Okay.
So once you start using the library, you are dealing with, for example, a page, a blog, things like that, and you never see arrays. You don't see the SOAP. You don't see anything like that.
Yeah, the XML structure.
Right. You don't deal with XML until you come to templates and data definition. Otherwise, you won't see XML at all.
Okay.
Wing, to that point, I want to let everyone know that I've enabled the Q&A app, which will allow people to post questions ahead of time and let us see them and indicate when we're answering them. I guess that part's not as important, but to the extent that it can help you prepare. I guess it's kind of it will only be useful to the extent that people will know ahead of time what questions they'll have, which might be hard, but to the extent that helps, we can use that as a tool.
Yep.
So, cool. So, well, I guess we're getting close to the end of our allotted time. So.
Oh, that was quick.
It went really quick. Does anyone have any other questions or comments they want to mention?
Or any suggestions?
Any suggestions?
No, everything looks pretty tight from my end here, and the library is awesome. I'm getting ready to open it up more, so I guess.
Well, look at the documentation first. You can wait until later on. When you are really interested in looking at the code, but look at the API documentation first. And I would suggest starting with the Cascade class, because there are about 200 methods in one class.
Oh wow. Oh no, what I meant by opening it up is not getting into your stuff. Trying to find a way for me to use it in my day-to-day, because right now all I've gotten was to install it and get it up and running and knowing that it works. but I would like to discover more of the functionality.
Yeah, start with the. Well, I will talk about the Cascade class next week, and that will be the like first class we will look at.
Okay.
Yeah, you can like use the single class to create, to move, to copy, to delete.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
In Cascade. Yeah, that single class can do a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Wing, I haven't looked at the agenda that you set up for the next tutorial, but to the extent that you could share the code that you're going to talk about.
Okay, let me just point you to the right place. Everything is there. So if you go to Cascade admin.
You want to try your screen share?
Oh, sure. I am where I am. Okay, let me just pull this over. I can't find my cursor. Okay.
I know.
Do the quick wiggle back and forth on the mouse.
Okay, can you see my browser?
Yes.
Okay. In Cascade admin, well, upstate.edu, cascade-admin. On the right side, you can find web services tutorial.
I am not seeing your browser.
Oh, you can't see my browser?
I cannot.
How about Erik Espana? Can you see it? And Chris?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes.
That's weird. All I see is your. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I think I had to open up my window more.
Okay. We are looking at the web service tutorial. Right on the right side, you see courses. And then there are like 3 courses. The 4th one is online tutorials. And I put everything here, including basic setup and the agenda.
All right.
Yeah, and if you expand 01, the materials is right here. I'm preparing the second part and the third part, and I'll put them on when everything's ready. So next week we will like look at the code that I'm like sharing using this link, and you are expected to run the code against your Cascade instance.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So that way, if we run into problems or have questions, we'll.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to look at the code now. We'll look at the code next week, but that's where you get the code.
Gotcha. Oh, that's great.
And I will like go over the basic things. Well, depending on how much people know. If people already know a lot, then probably I'll skip the first part and dive into the code directly. It all depends.
Okay.
All right.
All right, sounds good, Wayne. Well, with that, I guess we're all set for next week. I want to thank everyone here for joining.
Thank you for hosting it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, and you're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you, Wing, for.
Yeah, this Wing, I can't tell you how much this is going to help our team here. It's
we'll see. I don't know yet, and I can't promise too much right now.
It's a time saver, trust me.
Okay, well, we'll see.
For me, not for you.
Yeah, but if you, Chris, if you are interested in like diving into this project and trying to come up with something you want to do, some topics you want to talk about, well, we can do it like after my presentation. I'm saying like, okay, we are supposed to like to start from 2:30 to 3:30, but we can like when I'm done, we can talk about like projects and so on and so forth. Like after 3:30, yeah, and that's one way of like engaging people so that you won't be bored so much that you want to drop.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Wing.
Yeah, I'm all about collaborating. I like working in teams anyway, so it kind of goes hand in hand.
Definitely.
Okay, then see you next week.
Okay, take care.
All right.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
guys.